Having survived the trip across the Mediterranean to the shores of Europe and then heading overland, for many its destination Germany, the refugees made it to Hungary to find that the government there had already put them on its political agenda.
One of those things was a billboard campaign. There was 1,000 billboards around Hungary. They were saying things like, if you come to Hungary, don't take the jobs of Hungarians. If you come to Hungary, respect the laws of Hungary. And certain slogans, interestingly, in the Hungarian language. So who were they actually aimed at? Probably not the migrants.
And then the right-wing press of the governing party took up this narrative. Story after story of terrorists posing as refugees, saying that the refugees are sick and spread disease across Hungary. Because of all the fuss that the media campaign generated, the government was not getting prepared or organized. So while the media continues to pound the anti-refugee narrative, in the real world, nothing was done to try and handle the wave of refugees.
For reporters from the outside, this story has turned into a crash course on Prime Minister Viktor Orban's approach to the media. Within a year of taking office for the second time in 2010, his government passed a media law criticized across Europe for granting the authorities new powers to impose huge fines for vague journalistic infractions. That law led to demonstrations, as did Orban's proposal last year to put a tax on the internet, which was shelved after Hungarians protested that it would limit freedom of expression and access to information. That's the recent history, the latest chapter, the limits placed on access for international media to the refugees, and an alleged directive from the Hungarian Media Authority that state-owned television not show images of refugee children. When we asked, the media authority denied issuing such a directive, but it went on to say that, quote, the priority when it comes to refugee and immigrant families is the protection of children.
This is hypocritical, and in reality what they want is to avoid portraying the refugees as human beings. It's easier to galvanize public sentiment against a faceless, depersonalized enemy than to see women and children in the crowds of refugees.
The migrants, especially the Syrians, have been extremely open, and that's remarkable considering their situation, where they would be avoiding fingerprinting, but they would openly give their name and other personal information to a reporter. Many migrants have said to me that the reporters are our protection, stay with us.
Don't leave us, please.
The police are nice to us as long as the media are around.
The Orban government and others in Europe, including media outlets who have taken a hard line against the refugees, do have influence. However, a single tragedy captured by a lone photographer on a Turkish beach undermined their arguments and shifted the debate as well as the news coverage. The photographer works for Turkey's Doğan news agency, and her images went global after they were tweeted out by Peter Bukart of the NGO Human Rights Watch.
I wasn't surprised that it went viral on Twitter. I had expected that. I was taken aback by the fact that so many people came out in the streets and said enough is enough. I'm going to do something to make sure these refugees get to Germany. 2,000 drivers in Austria alone drove into Hungary to pick people up. And I think that's a very beautiful reaction.
The picture of the policeman tenderly holding the young 3-year-old boy, Aylin Kurti, had a very particular effect because it involved the person who represents us, as it were, the policeman, and the person who represented them, a tiny child, but they were sort of embraced together in a moment that must have been tragically sad for that policeman to find that boy. And we couldn't anymore say us and them. Suddenly it was all in one picture.
We must share these kind of images. Without them, we cannot truly understand this refugee crisis. In the last couple of weeks, the intense, tragic developments did affect public opinion in a positive way. No longer is the entire narrative focused on the imagined danger that refugees pose. And we can see that across broadcast, print and online publications, the tragic element of the story is now in the forefront of the reporting.
And not just in Hungary. The Sun, the biggest selling tabloid in the UK, is a notable example of that. Gone, for the time being at least, are the hostile headlines, the editorial hardlines. The paper is one of many news outlets in Europe that now sound more like Bild, Germany's biggest tabloid, which last week printed a handy pull-out guide in Arabic welcoming refugees to Berlin. That tonal shift is something almost no one saw coming before a few pictures changed the narrative.
Because those photos went viral on social media, journalists are constantly looking at social media to see what stories are breaking, especially with something like asylum, where so many migrants and asylum seekers actually operate through mobile phone systems and social media systems. That's where they find these stories. And I think they began to realize that they were out of step and maybe a bit old-fashioned.
We are dealing with a media which often doesn't tell the human angle of the story. It is possible to counteract this kind of often uninformed Western media dialogue with the stories of real people. It wasn't an easy decision to tweet this brutal picture, but the world needed to see it, and it opened people's hearts. And I think that's the greatest tribute that we can pay to Aylan Kurdi.
On the download this week, our reviewers on the coverage of the refugee story unfolding in Europe.
This week, Germany's biggest tabloid newspaper, Bild, published an edition with no images at all in an attempt to show the importance of photojournalism. The image of the dead boy may have been very shocking to many people, but I think that's exactly why we send journalists and photographers abroad. It's to bring home the individual human impact of the numbers and the reports of the events that are happening so far away, which may not otherwise reach us.
There is generally a stigma surrounding migrants, and by using the wrong terminology, we are allowing refugees who are fleeing danger to be subject to the same rejection, to be reduced to the same misconceived stereotype. We are taking attention away from the protection that refugees are entitled to by international law.